Today on Spotlight Now, focusing in on two organizations fighting for the rights of Native Hawaiians.
We have leaders from the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, along with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and their new board chair, Kahele. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suchi and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, thanks for tuning in here on this Tuesday to Spotlight Now here on Hawaii News Now. Thanks for tuning in. As we begin this conversation with our guests, we always like to encourage all of you watching at home or online to also engage in the conversation. You can enter your questions by scanning the QR code on the bottom of your screen or asking your questions within the comment section of Facebook.
And we want to get to the questions right away and welcome in our first guest, the head of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, Kali Watson. Thank you so much for joining us today. We want to start with some big news that was announced yesterday, a groundbreaking in Mo'iliili at the old stadium Bolodrome. Tell us about that project. We'll get into the scope of the department as a whole a little bit later, but I want to start with that because it is very interesting to see that progress.
Yeah, it's a first for the department because we have so little land here on Oahu, which also has our largest wait list of 11,400. We got to be a little bit more innovative and use what little land we have. This particular parcel is about 2 acres. And so what we're doing with Stanford Carr and Kaloa Robinson is putting up a high-rise, 23 stories, and involves 278 units. And, it's based on about $155 million investment, which is really great. It is going to focus in on the people on our wait list.
Tell us a little bit about who gets to live there and what that means. I understand that these are rentals, which is not typical.
Yeah, they're rentals. They're affordable rentals. It is an opportunity for the individuals coming off the wait list to save money, to also get prepared for home ownership. We're going to do quite a bit of projects throughout the state, as well as here on Oahu. We have our Ka'ulu Kahai project involving about 700 units. Then we also have the Kaupea, which is right adjacent to Kapolei High School. That's about 60 units. And so, there's a lot of activity that's going to be going on.
And if I'm understanding correctly as well, with this facility that's being built here, that doesn't necessarily mean that if someone is to get accepted and apply there and find housing in this unit, that doesn't take them off the list that they might already be on. Can you explain that process and how you're going to manage the rentals and those who are continue to be on that wait list?
Yeah, you don't lose your place on the wait list. You retain it. We're also looking at possibly, seeing if we can create some equity in this particular project. We've done that in our Ho'olimalima project in Kapolei, where we actually did a LIHTC, similar to this, a low-income housing tax credit project, where the equity that was generated through the sales of the tax credits as well as other sources is used to, at the back end, after a 15-year compliance period, home ownership is generated. This one is, it remains to be seen whether we can do that. LIHTC investors, as well as the different federal and state loans that are involved, we need to tweak that and see whether that can, this new approach that I'm contemplating, see whether we can make that happen. That remains to be seen, but future projects, we're going to try and do that, go up. We have a Waipoli project in Kapaa on Kauai, 82 townhouse units. Brand new approach for the department. We got to get innovative rather than just single-family residential, which uses up a lot of land, very costly. With all the people over 29,000 on our wait list, we got to get innovative. We got to build in large quantities so we can get the per unit cost down.
Let's talk a little bit about Act 279 in 2022, which allocated a sizable amount of money from the legislature to your department. How far along are you in spending down that money, and what kind of a difference is that making? I hear you ticking off all these projects, so clearly there's a lot of investment happening right now.
Yeah, that money is already spent, so to speak. We have about 28 projects. We're actually short another, $5.5 billion. So if we were to try and get all the people off the wait list, that's how much it would cost, $6 billion. So this is a start. We are going after federal funds with full court press, because now it's the timing. There's a lot of federal funds, and so we're subsidizing what we have and leveraging it. We're also using tax credits, bonds, and other financing sources to address our wait list and build units.
When that passed, that act, it was deemed as a really a momentous moment for DHHL and for the legislator to make that significant of a contribution within a legislative session. Do you foresee moving forward, be it this session or in the future sessions, that there could be another sizable amount that the legislature will allocate to the department, or do you feel that it's going to kind of return back to what we saw maybe in the past? And how are you working with lawmakers to figure out what would be an appropriate amount?
I think that's changed. Historically, this program has been in existence over 100 years. And in those 100 years, we've done about a little over 10,000 homesteads. It's about 100 a year per year. That's changed, I think, with this bold step by this legislature in passing Act 279, including with the support of Governor Green. I anticipate moving forward, the legislature, we're hopeful, will continue to provide the funding, especially if they can see that we're making progress. I think that's real key. And they're always asking me, what are you doing with the money? What kind of numbers are you generating? So I got to address that. That's on me to show that we can spend the money in an efficient way and leverage it. We're using it to buy lands other than just developing our existing lands. A lot of the lands, and that's one of the major problems with the program, is the lands that we have are located in isolated areas, very costly to develop, not necessarily that desirable. And so we've kind of changed that. One of the nice things about Act 279, it allowed us flexibility to acquire new lands, which is what we've done. We've done that on Kauai, we've done it on Maui. We're looking at doing it possibly here.
Would there be an option also to maybe offload some of the land that you're talking about that is a little less desirable, or will you always keep that and develop it perhaps down the line for something else?
Well, we're trying to look at the lands we have. We have over 200,000 acres, but about 180,000 of those acreage are, to me, unusable. It's in areas that are very isolated, like I mentioned, with little or no infrastructure. So using that, I actually prefer maybe transferring the management over to DLNR and actually look at some of the other state lands. There's nothing in the act or prevents the legislature, including the governor, to transfer other state lands, better lands that are more desirable, less costly to develop, into our program. So that's one of the areas we're looking at.
Has the department explored other avenues to create funding mechanisms to help the department? In the past, there have been things floated around with everything from a casino to other means and other developments in certain areas. What are some of the other ways where you're looking to receive funding, aside from the legislature and these federal funds, that will help move this process along?
Yeah, we actually we looked at all of our lands in inventory, and we realized that we do have some lands that are, very viable from a development standpoint. We have lands out at Kahele. We actually went out with a request for proposals. We're going to put up a raceway park over there. And so that will, along with ancillary businesses tied in with that, will generate income. We're also looking at an industrial park in the Campbell industrial area. That too will generate money. We're looking on Kauai. We have a 43-acre piece that we're looking at, maybe a cultural, center that for tourism that can generate not only jobs but also another revenue stream, which is located in Wailua next to an existing hotel that we own.
When you look at that number that you threw out there, $6 billion, I mean, it takes a lot to get there. And when a lot of the frustration with this department has been the length of the list and the timing. And when you're talking about, 100 homes a year in the past, and now the pace obviously, way outpaces that. But how do you think you get to that $6 billion? How do you get to really clearing that list, or at least making significant progress?
Well, one of the things we're doing is we are laying out development plans for quite a few projects, but it takes money, and we're not going to get it overnight. But the fact is that we can do a layout, we can identify the number of lots that we're going to develop, and on an interim as well as an existing approach, we can make lease awards. So this is what we call these undivided paper lease awards for specific projects. One of the sad things about the program is that people have been on the waiting list, have died on the waiting list. You have the State v. Kalima case, which is a good example, where the state acknowledged that they didn't carry out their fiduciary responsibility, including the department. And so as a result, they gave the complainants about $348 million. Unfortunately, a third of them have already died, and so have not taken advantage of the benefit. So one of the things we're trying to correct is by making lease awards up front. They don't wait till the project is done to get an award. And by getting it up front, even if they should pass away, unfortunately, they can at least transfer that homestead lease to their beneficiaries, who in this case need only be 25% Hawaiian rather than 50%.
I want to ask you, you mentioned over the top of trying to be creative with how you manage this and how to really get this list down. And you mentioned a few other options. I'm wondering, if you're someone on the list, do you have any leverage of deciding what type of home you'd like to move into? Because I believe that there are models that will allow for larger land for sustainable efforts where you can grow your own food and produce things on land. Of course, you talked about some of these townhomes. How are you able to decide and assign who gets what type of structure?
Well, we have several wait lists. One is agricultural, one is pastoral, and then we have the residential. Our focus has been on the residential, but we've expanded into other approaches, especially relative to our ag waitlisters. So we recently, for Honomu and Maku'u on the Big Island, we made 68 awards. The majority of the awards were subsistence ag lots, which are 1 to 2 acres, in which the homesteader has an option of putting up a house, or he can just use the land to grow food for him and his family, as well as livestock. And so that's kind of a different approach. We did about 16 last year in Poneva. We're going to expand that because we have, to me, an opportunity, especially with our agricultural lands, and in some cases very fertile agricultural lands, to make available to our homesteaders to take that approach, which I think Prince Kuhio was kind of geared into that. We're getting the people back on the land, back on the Aina, in order to rehabilitate and survive.
There had been talk at one point about possibly paying out some of the beneficiaries, and sort of what you were talking about in a different way, where you grant the lease to the beneficiary before the land is actually ready to be moved into. The idea that you would give people money and that they could then use that in the open market to buy a home that is not part of Department of Hawaiian Homelands. Do you think that that is something that is appropriate? Do you think that that is something you're pursuing? Where does that stand?
Well, the cost of a house is over $1 million, median prices. And, realistically, whatever we gave them wouldn't be enough. I think using that funding to put in infrastructure and giving them land that they can either, build a house or grow or get into some kind of business enterprise might be the better approach. Realistically, we do have quite a bit of land. And so one of the things that we're trying to do a full court press is get all of our lands that we have out of our inventory, the good lands, and into the hands of the beneficiaries. I think, and with the approach on the development and housing, we're using different approaches, not just a turnkey housing. We're also doing the LIHTC, or low-income housing tax credit to rent-to-own, for those that can't afford a large mortgage. We're also doing Habitat for Humanity, and those who want to put in some sweat equity can also maybe help build their house and get the cost way down. And then we're also giving and awarding finished lots. Where if you want to build your own house, we'll give you a finished lot. There's certain deadlines as well as standards you got to follow. But these different approaches, I think, hopefully will result in a situation where we don't bypass anybody on the wait list.
Aside from just the homes and lands itself, there's also the infrastructure that's involved. And one of those measures and one of the things that will help is just access to broadband and internet. And the department recently got a federal grant. If you can tell us about just what that is and who that's going to service and what kind of difference that's going to make.
Yeah, we recently got $72 million from the National Telecommunications Information Administration's Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program. That's a mouthful. But anyway, along with that and $17 million, so roughly $89 million from this the federal government to use to upgrade and put in this high speed internet. And so with that, we hope to connect all the different homestead areas, assist them in telehealth as well as education, as well as enterprise development, because that's key, especially in the outer areas where there's no communication. By doing this, we connect them to the real world as well as provide tremendous opportunities for them.
As Ryan mentioned off the top, we always like to take questions from our audience, and thank you so much to Jenna, who wrote in and says, "Aloha no, I have a question for Kali. If someone is renting at the Mo'ili'ili Apartments but is offered an award by the department, if they were to accept a 99-year lease award, would they be obligated to move out of the rental? How is that going to work?"
Well, if they get an award, yeah, I mean, that's wonderful. I'm sure, we wouldn't hold them back and say, well, no, you got to live here and continue to rent. We definitely waive whatever long-term lease they have, and we would probably be the entities offering that to them. So we definitely work with existing tenants, and that is one of the things. For some people, it's just going to be a temporary, situation where they do the rental, and as soon as a lease award becomes available, you move, and good luck and whatever way we can. But it is kind of a ways off. We're going to, have our dedication. We'll probably start construction the end of this year. It's going to take us 2 years to build. So it's a ways off before we get to that point. About 6 months prior to the completion of the construction, we'll start to reach out and see who's interested in being a tenant. And like I said, we do have over 11,000 on our wait list, so we don't anticipate having a problem renting it out.
Just when we're talking about the department as a whole, and as you head into this legislative session, are there any priorities or something that you would like to see get done for the department this legislative session that if you had a wish list for Christmas here, that this would be on the top of your wish list as you go into this next legislative session?
Probably another 600 million.
That'd be nice.
But I think one of the things good that we're doing is we're showing the projects we're doing. We've broken up and shown how much we're spending at 600 million and how much is needed to complete phase 2 of the developments. So like our Kahele project in Kapolei next to the Kroc Center, we have about 700 homesteads that we're going to issue. We've allocated about 140 million to build about 450 units. We need another 60 million to do the additional 250 million, the 250 units. So, again, we're going in not only to the state legislature, but also the feds saying, okay, well, we're doing this. We got 700 awardees, and in order to do the second phase, we need another 40, 60 million. And I think by doing it that way, it shows not only that we have a real project, we have real beneficiaries in place, and we have a developer in place that can just continue on with this additional funding.
Yeah, where do you anticipate seeing more high-rises? Do you think that there are spaces that you would like to see in town? There had been some talk around some land around Diamond Head possibly as well. Do you think that is going to happen in the future?
High-rise next to Diamond Head? I
Or
don't think so,
maybe
but,
low-rise,
yeah.
high-rise.
Mid-rise, yeah.
Denser,
High-rise, I don't
denser housing as opposed to what we've, single-family homes.
Well, and as I mentioned to you folks earlier, Kakakumakai, I don't think it would be inappropriate to have a high-rise. You got high-rises all over the place right across the street. So why can't the Hawaiians have a high-rise that provides housing for their workforce as well as the kupunas, as well as, just Native Hawaiians? So we definitely would be interested in working with OHA to see if we can make that a reality. And I don't think that's unrealistic, and I don't think it would be inappropriate. I think it would be more than appropriate to have high-rises for Native Hawaiians, especially in that location. We also have other areas too.
When you talk about that collaboration with OHA, if you can speak to that and just the importance of trying to build bridges between the various trusts and those organizations that support Native Hawaiian movement. We've seen in the past how there have been disagreements and how there at times have been a misalignment in some of the priorities. Can you talk about the status of where things are with this collaboration moving forward?
Yeah, I'm always been a real strong proponent of the Li'i Trust, including DHHL and OHA working together. I think collectively would be so much more effective, especially based on our individual trust mandates, and working and creating kind of a holistic communities where you have education, you have jobs, you have homesteads. You have all of the things that a good community should have to support our beneficiaries. So like with Kamehameha, we've actually collaborated in Nanakuli where they put up the Kalani Ho'okaha Cultural Learning Center. So we're also allowed them to put a whole bunch of preschools throughout our homesteading communities. They have a resource center in Maili. So we're looking at possibly doing some land transfers or exchanges whereby we would get land, we'd give them the lands subject to the Department of Interior approval, but then in return we'd get other lands that, you know, they got 364,000 acres throughout the state. They got some really nice lands that we've been looking at. So we're talking about that. You know, we also have Lunulilo Homes. We're working with them. We've identified a couple sites, one Kalamaula and Molokai, another one next to the Waianae Camp, to put kupuna housing up. And so their mandate is servicing our kupuna. They have the programs, they have the expertise, they have a long track record that I think would make them very viable. We're working with OHA to see if they can help in the financing of some kupuna housing.
I want to go back to what you were saying about OHA and possibly developing kakako makai. We know that the legislature had rejected that idea in the past. What's the pitch now? What would make a difference, do you think, to lawmakers that they would greenlight something like that, given the history of rejecting that proposal?
You know, I think the more appropriate guy to talk to would be Kahele. So I'm not going to, you know, jump on his plate and or for him. So I'll defer to him. And I've talked to him in the past, and he's got a really good approach. So.
Well, we're lucky enough that Kai Kahele will be joining us
Yeah,
right
there you
after
go.
this break, but let's stay on DHHL for now. I wanted to ask you about financing, and we have spoken to Billy Piper of American Savings Bank and Catherine No of CPB in the past, and they have been talking to us about some creative mechanisms to be able to do financing for beneficiaries in a way that was not possible in the past. So, you know, we've talked about public sector and you know, the government funding for all of this, but how important is the private sector in helping, you know, get these projects moving along?
Well, the private sector is extremely important. We are starting to move forward in using more of the low-income housing tax credits, which are generated through the sale of these tax credits to the private sector. The money generated goes to help the construction of these different projects, whether it's kupuna housing or LIHTC or single-family residential. I mean, we're even using that on the Boladrome site. So the private sector is real key. You know, the $155 million that is going to construct that 23-story high-rise doesn't come just from government. It comes from the private sector. And, you know, it's based on a 1986 law that created this opportunity for people that want to shelter their income to invest in lower-income communities to provide housing as an incentive. They get the write-off and protection of their revenues through these purchases of tax credits, and those can finance up to 70% of the cost of construction. So that money is real key. Otherwise, at the end of the day, if you had to pay it all or loan it out, the homesteader would not be able to afford it.
We are almost out of time, but I did just want to allow you an opportunity for have a final statement. What would you say to those out there who continue to be on the wait list, who are waiting for their chance and their opportunity? We heard of all the projects that you're doing. It sounds like there is a lot of things happening. But just your final message to those out there who are relying on this department and are continuing to wait and hopefully see this dream come to fruition.
Well, you know, I can appreciate the frustration and anger to a certain extent of those that have been waiting so long on the wait list and in many cases have actually passed away. Then you have the heirs or people that are maybe losing out because they don't have the 50% Hawaiian. So all I got to say is, you know, for the 29,000 on our wait list, and I anticipate more joining our wait list, that we are moving forward. You know, we look to generate over 7,000 new homesteads in the next couple years, at a minimum issuing leases. I really encourage the people on the wait list as well as those not on the wait list to contact the department, make sure your information is up to date, and if you want to get on the wait list, you can go right on our online internet website and get access to the applications. We're there to help. We're there to, you know, get the program moving, and that's why I came back to this program, because, you know, I can appreciate this opportunity. The $600 million has really, really made a difference, and so by leveraging it, we're going to be cranking out a lot of different projects that I think people are excited to hear where they're located, as well as the costs. I mean, and all the different approaches you can use to get a homestead. So, you know, hang in there, and I really, really encourage you to get informed.
It's wonderful to hear about all the progress that you're making. 7,000 in the next few years sounds exceptional. We appreciate the update. We look forward to talking to you again soon.
Sure.
Coming up right after the break, Kahele, the new board chair of OHA, is joining us. Stay with us. You're watching Spotlight Now.
Hello and welcome back here to Spotlight. Now we want to welcome in our next guest, the newly elected chair of OHA, Kahele. Thanks so much for joining. Great to see you again.
It's great to see both of you.
Let's start off, before we get into what's happening with your new role, just maybe talk a little bit about how things have been. What led you to decide to run for this office and this seat?
You know, to be honest with you, I didn't think I would be back in elected office this soon. When I left Congress a little over 2.5 years ago, you know, my family and I was just looking to reconnect, spend more time with each other, and go back to my job as a Hawaiian Airlines pilot and continue serving in the military. But things happened for a reason, and was given the opportunity to serve as the OHA Hawaii Island trustee. Former trustee Mililani Trask decided to not seek re-election, and you know, she personally asked if it was something I would consider. It wasn't anything at the time I was thinking about doing, but you know, when someone like Trustee Trask and other people I admire and value their mana'o, kupuna, asked me to consider it, it was something that I felt really important, almost like a pilina, an obligation to do. So, I decided, along with my wife's support, Maria, to offer myself to the people of Hawaii to serve as Hawaii Islands trustee. And fortunately, they gave me that opportunity to do so, and here we are.
And so I'm interested to know how you see yourself in this role. You've gone from being a newly elected member, and now you're already the board chair, so that was quick.
I don't think it's ever happened in the history of OHA.
And I think a lot of people were familiar with this organization, especially people who are non-Native Hawaiian, who have the opportunity to vote but don't necessarily know who or what they're voting for.
Right.
And so where do you see the voice of this organization, the importance of this organization, especially with the legislative session on the way?
Well, that's very important. The upcoming legislative session is just a little under a month away, and fortunately, myself and Trustee Galutaria have served at the state's legislature before. Both in the Hawaii State Senate, and we bring our relationships and our ability to navigate the legislature to the board. We have a very, very talented board, extremely dedicated group of 9 trustees. And we're looking to work together with the legislature this session, because we realize that in order for OHA to accomplish the things it wants to accomplish, it requires a solid partnership with the legislature and also the governor. And so I'm looking forward to working with Governor Green as well.
Let's talk a little bit about that relationship with the governor. Of course, you ran for that seat. How was your relationship with the governor, and do you feel that there can be a collaboration between this administration, noting that at one point you guys were kind of rivals on the campaign trail? How have things been since that time?
That's the democratic process. You run for office. I think competition is a good thing. Governor Green was successful. The people of Hawaii elected him. I support him, and I'm looking forward to working with him. He is also a very critical part of OHA's success. And I'm looking forward, along with the rest of my trustees, to sit down with the governor and his staff and to really articulate what's important for OHA in the 2025 legislative session, and see how we can also work together on what the governor's priorities are. Obviously, homelessness is something very important to him, and it's something that I think we can bring to the table, especially in Kaka'ako-Makai.
Okay, let's talk about
Sure.
Kaka'ako-Makai. We asked Kahele Watson, and he wanted to defer that question to you. So we know that the legislature in the past has said no to high-rises in that area. What is the argument now? Why do you think you can resurrect that argument, and what would be different?
Well, Kaka'ako-Makai has a unique history. And at one time, housing was allowed in the mid-1980s. There was the opportunity to develop housing, but as you pointed out, in 2006, the legislature took a position to prohibit residential housing in Kaka'ako-Makai. Of course, those are not OHA lands yet. There was a lot of work put in between 2006 and 2011 on a Kaka'ako-Makai master plan of what that should look like. And then in 2012, under the Abercrombie administration, under Chair Colette Machado, there was a negotiation to settle past due public land trust claims where the state owed OHA millions of dollars. And it was land-rich, cash poor at the time, and it decided to convey 30 acres of Kaka'ako-Makai to OHA to settle that public lands claim from 1978 to 2012. And so, the OHA has struggled for the last 10 to 12 years with trying to get the proper entitlements that were discussed in committee, were discussed during that legislative session, but were never codified into statute when the bill passed. They haven't been successful. Trustee Galutaria introduced the first bill in 2014, which my dad was a co-sponsor of, to repeal the residential requirement for Kaka'ako-Makai. They haven't been successful. I think the new leadership team we have at OHA, I think the new leadership team that's at the state legislature, especially under the leadership of Senate President Ron Kochi and now Speaker of the House Nadine Nakamura, gives us a unique opportunity to secure the entitlements that OHA needs around something that's really, really important for this state and Hawaii, and that's affordable housing.
So if you could give a pitch, what would that realistically look like? Because there are many who may be concerned about seeing what we see on the other side of the street of,
Sure.
of Ala Moana Boulevard and on the Makai side of just a number of high rises. What would you envision? Do you have a number or
Sure.
what that area and that space would essentially look like?
We have a very detailed vision. Now, I have to caveat, I'm not speaking on behalf of the OHA board, I'm not speaking on behalf of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, but this is my personal opinion in the time and work that a few of us have put into trying to solve this problem, right? And I think there is a path forward. I like and love a lot of the components of the 2011 Kaka'ako-Makai master plan: an open promenade, unobstructed views of the ocean. I grew up on the water myself, and so I value, swimming, surfing, jumping in and boogie boarding at Point Panic, right? I mean, it's something that is really important for our community, our culture, and the type of civic life that we like to live, out on the ocean. So open promenade, unobstructed views of the ocean, but look at a residential housing component along Ala Moana Boulevard. There's other landowners there as well. Kamehameha Schools also has some parcels, and so the concentration of any type of residential would be closer to Ala Moana Boulevard, and it would focus on affordable residential affordable housing, owner occupants, Hawaii residents, 50% plus one unit dedicated to those that make no more than 140% AMI on the island of Oahu. And so what we want to do at OHA is partner with the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, partner with the legislature to bring workforce housing and affordable housing to Kaka'ako Makai. And I think there's a balance where you can do that.
I had read recently that one of the strategies that you're implementing is for the board to be more actively involved with the legislature, not just you and
Absolutely.
Mr. Galateria, but also others on the board. So tell us a
Sure.
little bit about the strategy, and I know that your fellow board members have a lot of experience on their own, but what are
Yes.
you sort of helping to coach and teach them about what that process is like? Because it's so short,
There
the
is.
session is tight.
We have 9 trustees. There are 76 legislators, right? 51 in the House and 25 in the State Senate. And each one of us has unique relationships with every single one of those legislators. Now, we also have new freshmen, newly elected freshmen members in both the House and Senate that we're going to have to get a chance to know and educate on OHA's purpose, mission, values, what its goals are. But I think a very strategic effort in engagement, in reaching out to fellow legislators, of course, being there on opening day, making sure our staffs know who their staffs are, making sure they know what our legislative priorities are, and ultimately, how can we work with the legislature to achieve the things that they want to achieve, and at the end of the day, make life better for Native Hawaiians, right? That's OHA's core mission, and that's really what I'm focused on.
When you look at OHA and its history, it has unfortunately had that reputation of, those who may not trust the organization. And there have been audits done that have revealed just some poor spending.
Yes.
And we just know the history that we have seen this organization go through. One of the biggest things that people would like to see is a little more transparency with
Sure.
it. As the person who will be leading the charge as the chair, what are some of the things that you would like to implement to try to get back some of that public trust that has been lost with OHA over the years?
We started when I first took the chairmanship last week, which was to not go into executive session so that we could talk behind closed doors. I felt that wasn't something we needed to do in that space and time and moment, and so we decided not to do that as a message to the community that we wanted to do as much of our conversations in public as possible. The legislature is not subject to sunshine law, and so that is something that I'm not used to, and so coming to OHA, that is a organization subject to sunshine law, is something that requires a lot of thoughtful work into to make sure you don't violate that public trust. But at the end of the day, doing things in the most transparent way, OHA needs to rebuild that public trust, I really believe, and I think we can do that under this new leadership team that we have. Our chair, Stacey Ferreira, our CEO, Stacey Ferreira, is doing a fantastic job. We're excited to work with her. She has brought on a new team that is leading OHA along with her, and then now you have a new leadership team at the board level. And so I'm really excited about what's going to happen. I've heard the word just in the last week, contagious. That the excitement, the enthusiasm, the infusion of energy at OHA is contagious around this new leadership team, this new empowered model of inclusive leadership, of shared leadership. And I think people are really excited. And I'm excited to take OHA in that direction.
Another thing that made headlines just in the last week is this discussion about moving Mauna Ala's responsibility from the Department of Land and Natural Resources to OHA. What do you think about that discussion? Is that an appropriate thing to do? And if the state were to do that, should there be some funding tied to it as well?
Absolutely. So, Mauna Ala is the final resting place of Hawaii's most revered mo'i and our ali'i. And for decades, it has been managed by the Department of Land and Natural Resources. We feel at the Office of Hawaiian Affairs that this is more suitably appropriate to be under OHA's custodial care and management, given the mission that we have, and we're prepared to do that. I think in the past, DLNR has not done the best job it could have done, we'll put it that way, in managing Mauna Ala, and we're ready to step forward to do that if this is something that the governor feels is important, and we think he does. At the same time, we need resources. There are lands throughout the state that OHA could potentially be better suited to manage than the Department of Land and Natural Resources, but that needs to come with the financial resources to be able to manage that properly.
As we wrap up our time here with you, what is some things that you wish that people knew about the organization and OHA, and what are some of the things that I guess you would like to try to not only educate people about the organization, but also hope to instill within those, kind of again going back to just the overall values of what OHA should be moving forward?
OHA represents its beneficiaries, which are Native Hawaiians throughout the state of Hawaii. And the success of Native Hawaiians benefits the entire state. The reality is, though, that Native Hawaiians have historically suffered from the highest rates of incarceration, of homelessness, of health-related diseases, of the lack of quality education, the lack of pre-K education. It's a whole myriad of issues. That's something that we feel passionately about to help address. Again, improve the lives of every Native Hawaiian that OHA has to represent. And so my message to the people of Hawaii is that it's a new day at OHA. It's a new leadership team. We're very, very excited, and we're looking forward to earning back that trust from the public, proving what OHA's core mission is and why OHA's success is everyone's success. And it's exciting. It is truly exciting for Hawaii.
We're so happy to see you. Thank you.
Yeah.
We hope to have you back again real soon.
Thank you very much.
We're going to continue our conversation about the Office of Hawaiian Affairs with its CEO, Stacey Ferreira. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Mahalo.
From the moment you wake up.
Hawaii News Now brings you the stories that impact your day.
With more on the breaking news, we go live to Casey Lund.
Ready with the push alert? I'm going live.
We have an update to the breaking news we brought you this morning on Sunrise.
Okay, guys, as soon as this wraps, toss to Mahea.
And we've been covering this story all day.
Now we go live to Mahea for a new development.
Stand by for breaking news. They just captured the suspect.
That's confirmed?
Yes, sources just confirmed it.
The news you need the moment it breaks.
Here on Hawaii News Now.
First alert traffic is like always having a helpful passenger right next to you.
There's a crash up ahead in the left lane.
When we see a backup, we'll tell you live on TV.
That doesn't look too good.
And send an alert to your phone.
I'll type, you drive.
First alert traffic on TV, streaming, and on the Hawaii News Now app.
Keeping you and your ohana safe.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kahele Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders. And taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
And welcome back. We are continuing our conversation about the Office of Hawaiian Affairs with its CEO, Stacey Ferreira, joining us here now. You've been on the job for about a year. It's so great to have you with us. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I want to continue in with some of what the chair had shared, and also talking about your leadership, this idea that it is a new day at OHA. What does that mean to you?
It's an exciting time. And, Chair mentioned there's so much work to be done for our communities. And our communities are tired of waiting. They want to see action from OHA. And I think between our administration and the teams that we've assembled, we have a new department called Strategy and Implementation. And that was critical for us to put that team together because it was going to help us to actionalize our strategic plan. And, the leadership that's being assembled on the board side, progressive, innovative, energetic, just very committed to wanting to make sure that we are bettering the conditions of Native Hawaiians. And again, that's a lot to do, and we just need to get the footwork and get to the business.
I also want to get your reaction to some of the things that Kahele Watson mentioned and some of the things that they are going to be advocating for, but also just the collaboration that he's hoping for within DHHL and OHA. If you can speak to that about how you hope to work together to accomplish some of the things that won't need to get done, because it sounds like there is going to need to be that collaboration moving forward.
Absolutely. Director Watson has been amazing. Just watching him really uplift and amplify the work of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands is extremely inspiring. And he reached out to me early on when I went over to OHA and, had lots of ideas in which we could collaborate. So kupuna housing, as he mentioned, is a big opportunity for us. And then there are other ways that OHA is thinking about helping to better the conditions of Native Hawaiians, especially our homesteaders, in providing resources to fix their homes. So there are lots of health and safety opportunities that we can to ensure that our kupuna can age in place on the homesteads, and repairs that are sorely needed. So we want to be able to provide resources there. And then there's other opportunities, economic development ones, in which we can bring the superpowers of OHA and the superpowers of DHHL together and really start looking at different revenue streams that both agencies can benefit from.
I'm interested also, let's talk a little bit about Kaka'ako because that has sort of been floating around the discussion this afternoon. What are your thoughts about how likely it is that lawmakers would accept a change in the housing there?
Yeah, again, our chair has talked about really the compelling need to get housing. We need to get inventory. And, with a focus on workforce housing, we need to stop the export of our people here. We have more Kanaka on the continent than we do here in Hawaii, and that's a travesty, and we need to stop that. And I think with Chair's plan of putting more residential at Kaka'ako is a very compelling reason for the legislature to really rethink that, focusing on where we need to keep these professionals, right? Whether they're civil service or educators, healthcare workers, we need to keep them in Hawaii. And we have the opportunity at Kaka'ako to get that inventory into the marketplace.
And how important do you think, beyond just providing housing, but it also could be a revenue generator as well? How much of that is going to be important, and how do you see that playing into your pitch to lawmakers this session?
Sure. Mixed use is always the smart way to go if we can put residential on top and we have business on the bottom. We're also looking at a cultural center on the site. So really creating a Hawaiian sense of place in the urban core is super critical, being close to Waikiki. And, just creating a Hawaiian sense of place is sorely needed in Honolulu. And so I think that there's lots of opportunity to create workforce development and certainly economic development, but with a Hawaiian focus, I think would be really unique and amazing to have in the urban core.
I want to ask you about a story that was covered here on Hawaii News Now. Mahealani Richardson covered some conflict on Kauai that happened not too long ago with homeowners that were doing a cesspool to sewer conversion, and iwi kupuna was discovered, and there was tension on that site and some sad things that happened. I know that you flew there personally, you stepped in, OHA stepped in. Going forward, we know that there are thousands of these sites that are going to have to be converted, and along the shoreline we expect to see more iwi kupuna discovered as these start to happen. What can happen, or what do you think should happen? Should there be a process in place beyond what already exists so that that kind of conflict is avoided?
Yes, thank you. Iwi kupuna is going to continue to be the desecration of iwi kupuna is going to continue to be a big issue as cesspool conversion is being pushed, and the mandate, the looming deadline to do these conversions is upon us. So, OHA really had to step in. It got to a critical point in which the kia'i of that community in Wainiha was basically saying, look, you just cannot continue to do desecration at the expense of putting in these cesspools. And so OHA came, and we basically were able to bring the various state and county departments together. And we met with community, and we heard them. We heard their concerns, we heard their recommendations. And as a result of that, we've actually already have started to see some change. So the County of Kauai has now reviewed their process for permitting when it comes to these cesspool conversions. Prior to that community meeting, cesspool conversions were not considered construction. It was considered remodeling. So there was no permit required. They have now since changed that. So that's a big win for us on ensuring that there's going to be checks and balances in that conversion process. And then DOH is now looking at their application and requiring to get some verification from landowners if they select the box that says there are no cultural resources, Native Hawaiian cultural resources on our property. Now they're going to have to provide verification. That wasn't the case before. So we're making progress.
Do you think that, that incident will help to set maybe a precedent for, because that was just something that happened in Kauai County, that Kauai County was able to change their things. But as you mentioned, this is going to be something that all the islands and counties are going to have to deal with. Is that something that you folks would step in and look to provide guidance for other counties as well?
Absolutely. So, and it was great that, the county moved so quickly because it shows that it can be done, right? And it can serve as a demonstration point for the other counties to follow. And, once DOH starts making their changes, and I will let you know that DLNR with SHPD, they're also reviewing and looking at making changes there. I was really excited to have Speaker Nakamura join this community meeting because she has also made iwi kupuna a high priority for her coming into this next legislative session. There was a burial sites report that was submitted to the legislature in 2022, and only a few of the recommendations from that burial site report was enacted into law. So now she has asked me to provide her with the other recommendations so that she can now bring that forward into legislation this session. So we're really, really grateful for her leadership.
Let's talk a little bit about the land management that we spoke about with Chair Kahele, this idea of Mauna Ala being transferred to your agency. And also he mentioned that there are other lands across the state that may be more appropriate for OHA to take over. What are your thoughts about Mauna Ala specifically, and also, getting into more land management?
Mahalo. So Mauna Ala, as Chair talked about, that is one of our most sacred vahipana, and it makes sense for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs to be the co-steward with the Ali'i Trust. We have the administrative ability to do it, and then we have the cultural competence to do it. DLNR just does not possess that. And for us to be able to provide the honor and the sanctity that Mauna Ala deserves, we really believe that we can be that steward. And, DLNR's the way that they have stewarded Mauna Ala over the last 30 years or so hasn't been optimal. Millions of dollars have been spent in renovations because Mauna Ala continues to go into disrepair. We fix it, it falls into disrepair. We fix it, it goes back into disrepair. And so we're at the point where we're like, we have to stop, and we need Mauna Ala just to be taken care of, with dignity and respect, and not treated like a state park, because it's not. It is one of our most sacred spaces, and we want to steward it as such. And we have other vahipana, sacred vahipana, that we already steward. So Kukani Loko, the Ali'i birthing stones, are in our portfolio. So we have a track record of being able to steward very effectively these historical and cultural sites. When I first came on to OHA, I had a conversation with the governor's office about the transfer of lands. He recognizes that both OHA and DHHL have strategic plans that could benefit from having access to more aina. And, for us, being able to put Kanaka back on aina, whether it's for housing or food production, even our Native Hawaiian charter schools to have permanence for their facilities are all really important reasons why OHA really should have more access to land. And so we're very open to the conversations, and we already are in conversations with the governor's office for parcels, across the state that makes sense, again, to ensure that we can effectuate our strategic plan.
But with taking on some of that responsibility, there may be some in the legislature who may not want to provide the funding that goes along with that. How do you find that balance about pitching to take on more of that responsibility, but also with the requirement from lawmakers that with that's going to come a cost?
Yes, that's true. And, DLNR is under-resourced. And, I think some of the conversations that we're having about land transfers is because of that. And so, every parcel that ends up being transferred over to OHA will have a due diligence put towards it to ensure that whatever we do take on, we can manage successfully. But I think that brings up another point in terms of resources. So the public land trust, OHA is supposed to be getting 20%. We do not. We get a fraction of that. We get $21.5 million. At last estimate, when we did a independent audit back in 2018, OHA is supposed to be getting about $84 million. And so there's a huge delta in terms of revenues that we are not receiving. And this legislative session, we will be putting in a bill from our Public Land Trust Working Group that is, again, going to be asking the legislature to please give us $1 million so that we can get an inventory completed. That inventory is really going to help inform an accurate revenue account so that OHA knows what we should be receiving and the legislature knows what they should be appropriating each year.
You know, what's interesting, we talked to Kahele Watson, and his agency is really responsible for the beneficiaries on that list, of course, and their descendants, but really focusing on those who are 50% or more Native Hawaiian. Your agency, in contrast, is really responsible for the entire Native Hawaiian population, in Hawaii and perhaps beyond as well. Tell me a little bit about that responsibility, what it's like to carry that load, and what you hope that people understand about OHA.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. That's absolutely true. And yes, we have those that are 50%, are DHHL beneficiaries, and we have all the other Kanaka too. So it's a very big lift. And Chair Kahele talked about all the disparities that we are trying to address and the systems that are having to be deconstructed, infrastructure, and there's just a lot that has to happen as a result of the overthrow, right? So we're really dealing with a lot of historical and generational trauma. And so, the resources that we have to put forward, with the $21.5 million that we're currently getting from the legislature, is just a drop in the bucket that's really required to be able to address the needs to better the conditions of Native Hawaiians. And it's really important to note that in our mandate, the resources for OHA have to be here in Hawaii. And that's heartbreaking when we think about how many Kanaka are currently on the continent. So the commitment from the Office of Hawaiian Affairs is to create a Hawaii where they can come home to, and their ohana that are still here don't have to leave. And that's really important to us.
Okay, Stacey Ferreira, thank you so much for being
Thank
here
you.
today. The hour goes fast. Thank you for watching. We'll be right back. Spotlight Now continues right after this.
From the moment you wake up.
Hawaii News Now brings you the stories that impact your day.
With more on the breaking news, we go live to Casey Lund.
Ready with the push alert? I'm going live.
We have an update to the breaking news we brought you this morning on Sunrise.
Okay, guys, as soon as this wraps, toss to Mahia.
And we've been covering this story all day.
Now we go live to Mahia for a new development.
Stand by for breaking news. They just captured the suspect.
That's confirmed?
Yes, sources just confirmed it.
The news you need the moment it breaks.
Here on Hawaii News Now.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kahele Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders. And taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, great conversation today about where things are moving forward with OHA as well as with DHHL. A lot of updates, but I think one of the main themes we heard is this commitment to seeing what happens in Kaka'akumakai.
Yeah, I expect that to happen at the legislature this session, and really making a pitch that more affordable housing is needed. Why not put it right directly in town on lands that are, designated for those agencies? So very interesting to hear that. Interesting to hear about the synergy there, and also what they're calling a new day at OHA, and you really hear about all these projects that the Department of Hawaiian Homelands is working on as well.
Yeah, if you want to catch the interview, make sure you head on over to Hawaii News Now's website after this, and you can catch the full interview. We'll see you right back here next week as we focus in on waste management here in the city and county of Honolulu.
Aloha.